Don't you hate those intros? I'm just a normal person. What we're going to talk about today is the rebrand or the visual identity change that we've gone over at Air New Zealand, and specifically the word mark, which Jeff's going to talk about. But for the first 10 minutes, I just want to give you a bit of context and background to how we got to where we are today. So what was this project all about? Well, it was really about aligning our communications worldwide, globally, around one visual identity and one positioning. And why did we have to do that? Thank you, Jeff. Well, if you look at this slide, this was a communications audit that we did about a year and a half ago around the different regions that we operate in. So the US, the UK, Australia, and New Zealand, and Asia. And if you look at it, there is so many different typefaces on there, colours, different photography styles, the tonality of the content was all over the show. And you think, well, how did Air New Zealand get in this position? Well, in 2005, you might remember before 2005, we were very blue. And then in 2005, we changed to greenstone. We wanted to bring a lot more New Zealandness into the Air New Zealand offer, which before that was very corporate. So we changed to greenstone as our core colour. And if you can remember back, we introduced a new uniform by Zambezi. We got new planes, we retrofitted our current aircraft, and we did our airports and our lounges around the batch theme. So it was a real branded journey, and it was implemented over 3 to 5 years, and a lot of the success of Air New Zealand today was based around that change, and the guys at DesignWorks did a lot of that work. So, but back to us. At the same time, Air New Zealand went from being very corporate to being a personality-based brand. So it became about our people, how we spoke, what we did in terms of our actions and experiences that we created. So it became very personality-based, and all of you would have seen the change in the company since 2005 to today. But becoming a personality-based brand lent itself to this happening. So everyone's individual personality started manifesting itself in our communications and everything that we did, and we let it happen over that time. But it got to a point where we thought, well, we're not really talking in a single voice or a single message or looking the same across everything we do. So we had to address that. So we kicked off this project, and we started by looking at things that we did well and we wanted to keep. And obviously the koru, which means different things to different people, but has a very strong kind of meaning internally to people at Air New Zealand. So that was going to stay. So we didn't mess with the koru at all. We reviewed our typefaces that we were using, and we were using multitudes of typefaces. But we're really liking how we were using NewZeld. We were using it at the time in some of our core signage, really, and so we thought, well, we'll stick with that as our hero typeface, and we put a bit more constraints around it, that we were going to use it just in single words or for 2 words, and it looks really good large too, as you can see on this back wall here. We introduced a new communications typeface, Apex. It's quite sophisticated, bit of modernity, and those, so NewZeld and Apex are going to be our core communications typeface. Good old Berthold up there, we've been using it since 2005, and we use that in our signage, so things that are very functional. I thought, well, we'll keep with that, because we didn't want to go to we're going to go to the investment of changing all our signage, but it works really well in those types of environments. So that was our typefaces. To the colours. So as I said, we were very strongly greenstone and white, and we had supporting colours around orange and green, and we had the blues or the teals in there as well. But we've changed our core colour to black, and we've been thinking about it for a while. And again, black means different things to different people, but we're really inspired, I suppose, by its competitive spirit. It's winning the sports teams of New Zealand, and it's quite a bold colour too. So we thought, well, it had been going around in the back of our minds, and then we had the opportunity with the Rugby World Cup that we introduced, that you've probably seen, a black A320, and we put the NZAU silver fern on that, painted the paint black, and it arrived in New Zealand, and the reaction from the public was just amazing. They were like, why haven't you done this before? This should be the colour of Air New Zealand, paint all your planes this colour. So that kind of gave us the confidence to go, yes, we'll, and it happened at the same time, we'll switch our core colour to black. Supported obviously with white, and we wanted to get our secondary colours, or our accent colours, matched in with our uniform, which is the blue, the violets and the green. So our ground staff wear the green uniform, our staff in the air wear the dusky violet, commonly known as pink, and the sky blue. So that's kind of the constraints that we put around those colours. We didn't really have a photography style, and to be honest, we weren't using much photography. We'd become very graphic based, as you saw in that first slide of the audit of the communications. So we wanted to develop a photography style that really matched the tonality of who we are. So it's really real human shots, kind of the shots between the shots, intimate and genuine, and quite warm. So this is just from a recent photo shoot that we've done that you'll start to see getting out there in the market. So that's just kicking off, and that's going to build, and we want to use a lot more photography because that's a lot more real and about the personality of the organisation than graphics. So how we speak, our tone, and for us this is around an honest edge. So honest always being talking in a transparent and authentic manner, but the edge part being there's always a bit of a twist or a quirk to it. And I think that's best represented when we did the body painting campaign, which was about all-inclusive fares, so it was really honest in what we were talking about, but the twist was obviously we did it in body paint. I remember when we did that campaign, everyone was like shitting themselves about putting body painted people in an ad, and now that's kind of like, that's just, we do that tomorrow. But at the time, it seemed pretty risque to do that. And we never really put any framework around how we spoke, and then Rico came along. And Rico was quite challenging, both internally and externally. He was pretty polarising, and because we didn't have a framework for how we spoke, he just spoke how we wanted to, kind of. And whether that was right or wrong, we felt going forward we needed to have a lot more of a framework and some guidelines around our tonality. So this is where we got to around an honest edge. So that's our guiding principles going forward. How does all that come together? You've probably seen in our branded comms, in the retail communications, we've gone a lot more template based. We used to generate different creative for our EDMs and print ads every week that would go out in the paper. So we've moved to a lot more of an efficient system and a lot more consistent in its colour, tone, how it looks, and it's really paying dividends for us. Internationally, it's a lot more photographic based, and our offshore markets, so still using the core colours, and you can see orange is still in there in a tiny little sliver. It's just sitting in there at the moment because we use orange as a call to action on our online and websites, mainly like book now buttons, and the online guys didn't want to give it up because they reckon they've trained customers that orange means book now. Okay. It'll gradually disappear, I'm sure. It's still in there as a tiny sliver. Our hero campaigns, you probably might have seen the billboard that's outside. We came in, which is the next iteration on for the All Blacks. A bit more of a premium feel, but still approachable, particularly in how we've set the guys up there. And there's another example for WOW. So a bit more consistency in what we're doing, particularly with the type. Translates online. Online's a hard one because black doesn't work so well in the online environment. so that our websites are obviously white as the core background colour. We've got black in there as an example, but if you've been on our website, we're trying to introduce photographic style, so that main tile is generally always a photo. Some of those secondary style tiles, very different to what we were doing before, which was very much graphic based. And through the actual experience, so if you've been on one of our new aircraft, or ones that we've been retrofitting, we're introducing it's basically a black and white colour scheme, as you can see here. The pink uniform through to the IFE, so it's starting to translate through the physical experience. We're introducing new A320s domestically, so over the next couple of years, I think we're about 3 or 4 already, we'll start to see this go right through the fleet and on our international aircraft as well. And that brings us to signage in the environment. So this project's about to kick off because all our signage out there at the moment is white and green stone, introducing new signage throughout the whole experience, which is a huge job for Air New Zealand when you think of all the physical locations that we have. So it's a big job for the team. That's the reason why I left. The signage project is coming up, so it's just too big for me to think about. So I pass it off to the team. But obviously a core part of our signage is our word mark. So Jeff's going to talk about the development of the word mark now. And you know, for us the word mark hasn't really changed in its form since the 90s. No one really wanted to touch it, and luckily it came up as an opportunity in this to really look at it and review it. So I'll pass off to Jeff.
I'm just going to add to what Hudson just talked about. I mean, just that whole process, that wider context around the brand, I think it was really important, that process, to kind of get every part, all the different partners start talking, and I kind of, when I think back on that process, you correct me if I'm wrong, is that it felt, traditionally, you know, we work on brand identities, we kind of take it and we kind of hide in our studio for, you know, a little while, and then we come back and we present it and they go, yeah, great, and we implement it, and then they, you know, internally people struggle to kind of implement it and everything like this. The great thing about the process that happened this time was it kind of felt like, to me, it was like a rapid prototyping of an identity system. So it wasn't just us involved, there was, you know, the ad agency was involved in certain parts, and there were various, you know, a lot of the team from Air New Zealand involved as well. And the way that identity developed and got defined and kind of eventually got to where it was a lot of work and a lot of workshops in between that, getting people involved internally as well. So I think that was a really great job and a great way of doing it, which is kind of quite untraditional in the way that we've been used to doing it as well. So it was really good to be involved in that. And so, you know, in that context, you know, it eventually led to, well, what else needs to be evolved and updated as well. So Hudson came to us to say, well, yeah, no one's touched this thing or had the opportunity to touch it. So we've got an opportunity now. And so trying to sort of like figure out, early discussions was trying to figure out how we want to approach this in the right way. And I think before we got started, we wanted to have a really robust process that ensured a really good result and the right result, rather than sort of just, oh, let's start playing with typefaces and doing all that sort of stuff. So initial conversations were around how we could create a couple of things, ensure the right process, knowing that Air New Zealand's not going to do this every year. It's going to be a long-term piece of work. We need to get it right. Secondly, we need to have the right people collaborating on the project as well, and I think that was a thing that we learned from the brand piece, was it was going to be a collaboration, it wasn't going to be just us doing it. And then thirdly, it was making sure we had a set of principles that we were all working to as a team, so we could judge the work in a way that wasn't all about, you know, I like that typeface, you like that one there, and all this sort of stuff as well. So kind of those are the kind of main sort of things. So if you go to the first slide, this is a selection of slides and presentations that we sort of did to form up that process and that thinking around how we were going to approach the word mark. So various sort of things within here, you know, the suggestion of doing what Air New Zealand's done really well over the past and support New Zealand designers. So the Trillius Cooper uniform that Hudson touched on before, you know, supporting New Zealand designers. So, you know, the suggestion of using Chris Salisbury to kind of be the type technician, I guess, to kind of make sure that it was done really, really well. Part of that also, you know, things around process, how we're going to keep a robust process but quite simple. We didn't want to overcomplicate the whole thing. And then we also just did, you know, brief audits around existing airline evolutions, brand evolutions and things like this, and also some dramatic kind of steps as well. So, and this was tabled at various sort of times with the Air New Zealand design team, and it was really good to just have that open conversation. So it wasn't closed off process as we were going along. Got to, you know, territory boards and mood boards around where we were going to go, but we had a scale that we were kind of using, which was going from existing evolution to kind of back to the future, really. There was this kind of other end where we were going to actually, and we'll talk about a little bit as we go on, is bringing back Tom Elliott's 1960s Unicase word mark as well, so to explore that as well as the existing 90s trade in as well. So if we go through, out of this process, basically defined the team that was involved. And again, want to sort of emphasise this kind of collaborative approach that happened. You know, there's the whole Air New Zealand design team that was involved. That was critical that they came on the process with us, because they were essentially the people that we were going to be using it the most. And then there was also us from, I guess we've been working with Hudson guys for so many years on the New Zealand brand and then the brand identity pieces as well. And then there was Chris, who, you know, we just wanted to be able to have someone that could help us from a technical perspective really get it right, you know, and that also influenced the testing. And I remember a conversation when we briefed Chris, got him up, and I think the one thing that we all sort of realised right at the start, including Chris, was, you know, the privilege to be able to do something like this piece of work. So we all wanted to get it right, and so we briefed him, and he was at the airport. He starts texting me about stuff, you know, while he's watching planes, you know, plane spotting at the airport and things like this. And so, you know, it was really good that everyone started to kind of get really enthusiastic about it and started to input into ways that we could go and do it. So the team got defined, and then the other part of the process was, the next slide, was a set of principles that we all agreed on before we started working on it, which was all about trying to take out all the subjectivity out of how we're going to go through this process. And I think this was really good for us, because it really kind of made us look at things and kind of make decisions that were based off these principles as well. So quite simple, you know, modern but not trendy. We didn't want it to date. We didn't want it to be, you know, this kind of, have too many sort of distinctive elements in it that made it, you know, not in fashion the next year. Distinctive but not too quirky, and I think this is where we started playing around with the letter forms, where, you know, the 1960s Tom Elliott version had a lot of quirks in it. Were they good or were they bad? And those are the questions that we had to sort of ask ourselves as we were going. Authoritative but not overly formal, which I think the Trajan typeface at the time, you know, was very authoritative, and I think Chris said that to me at the airport while he was looking at it. He said the great thing about it is that you can read it on the plane, you know, and it has this authority about it. And, you know, but it was probably overly formal, so how are we going to, you know, relax it a bit? And it had to be bold but not brash, you know, it had to have a New Zealand feel about it. So that's what we were trying to do. But, you know, the outtake was that we were trying to make it reflect what Air New Zealand was all about in terms of the new strategy, the new brand, which was all about a liberated, innovative airline in New Zealand. The 90s word mark, and I think the original one was done in not the 90s, and then there was a tweak in 2006 or something like this. And it's quite interesting looking at it, and there were some real positives about this, like I was just saying before, it did have an authority about it, it did have this kind of simplicity to it, but it just looked, started looking a little bit too kind of traditional and didn't reflect what the guys had been doing over the years. This was some of the working sessions that we had, and there's thousands of photos that we've got in movies that we did as we were doing this process. But you can see we were trying to define how far we could go. Start to turn rocks over and start to kind of play around with things. Well, we even played around with New Zealand as the typeface, lowercase serifs versus lowercase sans, all of these sort of things. And also the sacrosanct koru, how are we going to bring a bit of a link to that, to the typography into the koru as well. So they look like they belong to each other, because if you go back one, Hudson, sorry, they didn't actually feel like they belong to each other after a while. They look like they've just been kind of like bun together as well. So we wanted to kind of link them together. So from that, we basically defined two territories. And one was the new, the evolution of what the tragedy typeface, and then also bringing back, and I think this is actually Hudson's suggestion actually, this was Back to the Future, bring back the Tom Elliott unicase version as well, which we kind of got quite excited about, and it was kind of interesting talking about it, because it's kind of had some really good quirky parts to it. It's quite Kiwi in the kind of quirks and the letter forms as well. And so what we want to do was contemporise that. So we played around that. So if we go to the next one, this is some of the workings that we did when we had those two territories. Again, we sent Chris off to kind of basically do a bit of a, just go out there. Let's see what we covered everything in the two territories. And so again, this is just a snapshot of a lot of the workings, but that's some of Chris's drawings from the book, and while he was at the airport and things like this, and we started to say to him, well, is there anything else that we could kind of do? And so he went out there and, probably a bit out there, it was one of these things, but we had to kind of go through that process and sort of say, is there anything else that we've missed here? And those principles kind of kept us in line. We started to kind of go, well, judge those things and say, well, yeah, maybe it's in fashion, but it's not right for New Zealand, all of these sort of things. So various sort of things through here. How much character do we inject into it? Because I think this is interesting with Chris, is that he was able to kind of play around with a lot of kind of detail elements, the subtleties of typography. And they may look good on one letter form, but when you put them all in one word mark, they just become this weird looking, word mark, and they just become too over the top and distracting as well at the same time. So we also played around with the kind of sans lowercase and everything like that as well. We wanted to kind of keep that feeling of the original mark, where the koru felt like the tail, the word mark felt like the body of the plane, and that's the movement that was in that as well. So we're trying to sort of balance all those elements. And this is where we kind of got to, and the final word mark. And it's funny seeing all the workings and all the work that kind of went into that. But this is the final word mark, where we basically played around with various sort of aspects of it, adding in elements around the typeface to connect up to the koru as well. So we go to the next slide. This shows you some of the detailing that we worked on with Chris, and some things around slight little serifs on certain letters to kind of create that movement, but also that connection to the koru. Then softening it off on certain letter forms as well, just to kind of give it a more engineered feel as well, because we sort of felt that it needed a bit of that. But then also connecting back up to the original word mark by having a slightly larger A, more cap A with the rest of the letter forms as well. So, and you can sort of see there the greys, the original typeface word mark, and then the new one over the top. And then, so once we'd gotten to that point, where again we needed to know how robust it was in terms of testing. And again, when we talked about this, and you know, we all talked about how we were going to test large scale, because it had to go on planes, it had to go on signage, and then it had to go onto a website, really, really small as well. So that was a really valuable process that we went through with Chris. He even talked about printing them out on a billboard and attaching them to the car and then running it down the road to see if it was readable, all of those sort of things. And so it was just a really good process to kind of go through. And so this is colour testing and testing it in the reverse version as well as the positive version. And then other details that we're working on outside of this that we decided to test as well, on photography, pattern device and all of these sort of things as well. So that was a good process to go through. Large scale, I hung this up in the warehouse and had a look at it to sort of see how it worked, and then also having the smaller scale next to it as well, just so visually it would do its job. And the planes as well. It's always the designer's dream to do a bit of livery. So this is just a visual. What's happened with all the testing, which has been really great, is the design team at Air New Zealand really taken it and they're starting to kind of really implement it all, and you start seeing it all over the place now. I've seen it on various sort of ads and emails and things like this, so it's starting to get out there, and the guys are doing a great job doing it as well. So when did the planes come out? Do they? October. Yeah. So it'll be out there soon. And then there were other sort of applications as well, like the new stationery and everything like this as well. So having that testing process was really important. That it could work on a business card, jump on a plane, down to various other sort of elements as well. So I think it was us having a really collaborative process, making sure that we got the right result and making sure that we didn't fuck it up really. It was making sure that we didn't do something that was going to be, it wasn't going to be timeless. So I think that was a really good process, that we kind of kept it open, got the right people involved, and that we tested it really, really well to kind of make sure it worked really hard.
I can just talk for a second about the sign-off process. You're going to go, well, who gets to sign this off? And all the great work that had gone on to it led to me sitting with Mike Todd, who's the GM of marketing, and Rob Five, and I was shitting myself, taking the word mark in to get approval, and had about my half an hour presentation pack sitting there in front of me. Just started, and I was away doing my talk, and Rob just looked at me and goes, just show me it, because I was, it's like, oh, but all our work for the last, like 6 months, just show me it. So I showed him, and he goes, yeah, it looks really great, modern, contemporary, it's fine, yep, good work. So that's how it got signed off.
Yeah, when Hudson told us about that, the presentation, we were all, we were forming up a presentation before, trying to make it, really simple, kind of, made full flat after this, all this stuff. But when Hudson called us up and said, oh, it's done, it's signed off, we were just like, it's pretty unbelievable in that sort of sense that it was that simple in a funny kind of way. But we at our studio, we definitely sort of see it as a real privilege to be involved in a project like this, and being involved with the New Zealand for this long really, and being involved in various sort of projects, and the Black Plane, that Hudson mentioned as well. Doing projects like that, is a pretty kind of we're pretty grateful to be involved in things like this, and so we want to, when we get involved in these things, we want to make sure that we do the best job and the right thing as well. So we thank you for that. That's it.